Debate at 9, powered by Sarah.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today, where the entire world is held captive by one virus, one pandemic, everyone is trying to understand the origins of that particular virus that started in Wuhan in China. And as there are new emails, as there are new twists and there are new dramas about what really happened, and the Dr. Fauci email trail clearly shows us there is more than meets the eye. It's something we're going to be debating this Friday evening as debate number one, as questions arise now, investigations on the email trail that needs to be done to get an understanding of the China COVID truth. That's debate number one coming up this Friday evening. And debate number two, we're going to show you, viewers, India fights COVID, reports on India's COVID fight from across India. We get you details from each state. Let's tell you the headlines this Friday evening as controversy over Dr. Fauci's mails gets bigger. Was America's top doctor informed of the alleged conspiracy in early 2021? Trump claims vindication on Wuhan lab theory, demands grows for global cooperation on the probe.
Mr. Sachin Waze, Mr. Kazi and Mr. Howard. These three of them were always present. He started right away. He said, I want 25 crores.
Sensational claim by car designer Dilip Chhabria says Waze and gang extorted from him. Prime Minister chairs a high-level meeting on inoculation, expresses concern on vaccine wastage.
सभी वैज्ञानिकों का और हमारे इंस्टीट्यूट्स का, इंडस्ट्री का पूरे देश की ओर से धन्यवाद व्यक्त करता हूं.
As India battles pandemic, Prime Minister Modi thanks scientists for working relentlessly on vaccines and treatments. Captain to retain top post in Punjab. Sources say plan in the works to placate Navjot Singh Sidhu. Our question today is, has there been a Wuhan playdown? I welcome all our guests who are joining us today. Sanju Verma, National Spokesperson of the BJP with us. Professor Madhav Nalapat, Strategic Analyst live from Delhi with us. Dr. Sriram Chaulia, Professor and Dean, Jindal School of International Affairs and Republic Contributor of International Affairs also with us. Major General G.D. Bakshi, Defence Expert live from Delhi with us. Amesh Adilja, Associate Editor of the journal Biosecurity and Bioterrorism, Member Infectious Disease Society of America, IDSA, live from Pennsylvania, United States with us. Einar Tangent, Political and Economic Affairs Expert, live from Beijing with us. Vivek Srivastava, Political Analyst, and Ashutosh Mishra, Senior Journalist, also live with us. I first come across to Amesh Adalja, who's joining us, Associate Editor of the journal Biosecurity and Bioterrorism, live from United States with us. This is a very clear detail, Mr. Adalja, that we've got with us, which indicates a Wuhan playdown. If we actually look at the 3,200 pages of emails that have been obtained through a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit covering the period from January to June 2020, they show conversations by Dr. Fauci during the period that were playing down the Wuhan lab leak theory. One shows Dr. Fauci was informed of the possible engineered virus. This was in Jan 31, 2020, and in Feb he replied saying that I'll call soon, when the mail went from Anderson to him, and they said that some features of the virus potentially showed engineered. The Mail 2 trail shows that Dr. Fauci was in touch with China's top health experts. This is in March 28, 2020 mail, and it shows that he completely understands something when he was misquoted in an article. This is from George Gao to Dr. Fauci. A Mail trail 3 of April 16, 2020 shows United States could possibly be aware of the Wuhan lab leak theory. If this is it, then the question that only persists is, was there a Wuhan lab link play down in Jan itself?
I don't believe that the lab leak was played down. What happened in the United States was that the lab leak hypothesis was bundled together with conspiracy theories about bioterrorism or an engineered virus. The lab leak hypothesis has been something that's been actively investigated since the very beginning. And I think it's important to remember, in the early days of any kind of infectious disease emergency, it is important to look and see, could this be a biological weapon? And it appeared in the early days that there was some conflicting information. And as science evolves, that idea that this virus was engineered fell away because it wasn't actually true. It doesn't appear that this virus was an engineered virus. What likely is the case is this either was an animal origin virus or this was an animal virus being worked on in the lab in Wuhan, that there might have been a biosafety lapse, an accident that could have started a series of cases. I think we need a transparent investigation to understand this. We need to see the medical records of those people who work there to be able to determine this. But I think this has to be done in a non-punitive manner. We want to know the answer, and I think the Chinese government needs to be more transparent about the origin, because we're going to face more infectious disease emergencies in the future, and we want to be prepared.
Okay. I also want to go across to Sanju Verma before I come across to others, as I also want the Indian government to start asking for a thorough investigation in this, Sanju Verma, because isn't it time that India also asks for an investigation, especially when China makes it certain and known that there's an Indian variant that has possibly taken more lives, when it's clear that China itself is trying to even give us certain oxygen concentrators on a hike, when in fact the origin of the virus started in Wuhan. Isn't it time India, along with the other countries, starts a very strong clamor for a growing investigation into the origins of the COVID-19 virus?
You know, Rhythm, I think you raised a very valid point, and I absolutely concur with the fact that the origin of the virus needs to be probed, and China needs to come clean, though transparency is something that China has not been particularly known for. I just want to put a couple of things out there in the public domain for your viewers. While it's still initial days, I think what has sort of made this whole role of China, rather messy, is the fact that the various stakeholders involved who are in the know of things, or who are supposedly in the know of things, each one of them seems to be passing the buck. Now, there are some theories which say that Dr. Anthony Fauci, Chief Medical Advisor to the White House, he actually funded the Wuhan, Institute of Virology to the tune of more than $600,000 in the last couple of years. Not directly, but he was aware of state-sponsored funding to the Chinese laboratory in Wuhan. There is also another theory which has been propagated, and that is that the director of National Institute of Health in the United States, Dr. Francis Collins, and I name the National Institute of Health because it's the premier US public health research body. And it is claimed that Dr. Francis Collins was also in the know of how the virus was actually engineered in the laboratory and is not something that is organic. Now, even Dr. Francis Collins says that he was never aware. He has not financed the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So the limited point I'm trying to make is that who are the key stakeholders? The key stakeholders in this, against whom there are grave allegations, of course, China, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, National Institute of Health in the United States, led by Dr. Francis Collins, Dr. Anthony Fauci. I think these are the people who need to be probed, along with the director of World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros, because everybody says that Dr. Tedros was aware of it well before it came out in the public domain.
Also now.
So my limited point is that there needs to be a thorough probe, but we first need to put aside the conflict of interest. Because don't forget that if Dr. Fauci financed the Wuhan Institute of Virology, he cannot be probing the matter. If Dr. Francis Collins of National Institute of Health funded the Wuhan Institute of Virology, he cannot be a party to the probe. So I think the first thing that needs to be done to ensure that there is transparency is to ensure that people who have a conflict of interest in this probe are not a part of the investigation.
Vivek, I will come to you. I don't want anyone to be speaking, please, out of turn, because it's a very crucial debate. I've got guests and I have very pertinent questions to ask you. Sanju Verma has made a crucial point. Vivek, I'll also come to you soon. I want to first go across to Aina Tangent, who's joining us live from Beijing. And Mr. Tangent, my question to you is going to be on what Trump today demanded. 10 trillion USD should China pay the global damages? Were these man-made origins of the virus brushed aside in April 2020? Because I'll tell you how it's also been revealed earlier that the Chinese army projected the next world war would be fought with bioweapons, and for that purpose it developed in 2015 coronavirus to destroy the economy, country's health infrastructure. It added also the US State Department obtained Chinese documents that disclosed the design. Undeniably, it's possible the WIV was mixed up in some heinous work.
Well, as far as Donald Trump's concerned, I mean, he was also the person who was suggesting that you ingest bleach or shoot it into your body or use some sort of ultraviolet ray to somehow on your organs. I don't know that he's necessarily the best person to be talking about this. He's still clinging to this idea that he's the president of the United States. In terms of this overall picture, keep in mind that, there's two ways you can go with this. You can go with science. You've heard from a distinguished person who's a professor who's involved in this, and he's told you what this virus is, and he doesn't see it as man-made because there would be telltale markers that would be in there. Now, you can always take a political stance on these, and that has resulted in tragedies around the world as governments have decided that they would play politics with science. And that is, in some cases, unfortunately, something they can't avoid because they don't have the kind of medical backbone that they need. But at the end of the day, you cannot have a situation where, you want to just kind of blame people. I mean, what I'm hearing now is that somehow Fauci was involved in sending money to China to create a weaponized version of this coronavirus. The facts suggest that 600,000 was sent there, but that's not enough to do this kind of gain-of-function research. It was meant to study the coronavirus itself, the spikes, and the materials were sent back, and in fact back to DARPA. Now, I'm not going to suggest that the U.S. government did this. I'm just saying that it would be very far-fetched to believe, given the relations between the United States and China, that somehow they would decide to do gain-of-function research in China. That just doesn't seem to pass the smell test.
That's a point you are making, but I do believe larger points also here. Major General G.D. Bakshi is raising his hand. I'll also come across to you, Major General G.D. Bakshi. Dr. Cholia, you also raised your hand there, and I want to ask you, as these are documents and there are also scientists, the global scientific community also demanding an investigation, should China also be demanding a probe when there are certain investigations, and China should be joining that? But 3 researchers at the Wuhan laboratory were also treated in a hospital in November 2019, just before the virus began infecting humans in the city. What are we to make out of the origins of a virus when China is not, as of now, really letting an investigation start on the origins, Dr. Cholia?
Yeah, Rhythm, that's the whole point, right? I mean, China has been obstructing and obfuscating. Mr. Tangen is saying that we should not play politics with science. Who is playing politics with science? It's the People's Republic of China. They started this. They covered up for many months when it was percolating, it was spreading, not only within mainland China, but across the world. They reported it very late. in late January, by which time probably several months of transmission had been going on. It was the Communist Party, the dictatorship of Xi Jinping, that covered up the fact that this had been circulating. Forget the origin. The origin, of course, is now the mystery to be resolved. But even the fact was circulating, they delayed the information. So that was the first politics they played with science. After that, all the investigations that have happened so far, Rhythm, the WHO inquiry, most of these have been politicized by China. China decided who would be on the WHO investigation team. China said, we are a sovereign state. You cannot come and investigate wherever you like free. So we will do a guided tour for you. So the WHO investigation was a sham because it was a joint thing done by China and WHO. And WHO scientists were escorted all the way and shown in a kind of a artificial manner what the Chinese wanted them to see. And the report was also written in such a fashion. It was compromised. So who is playing politics with science? It's China. The Communist Party's legitimacy, its survival, its a so-called model of successful governance. All these are at stake. They want to cover up because they don't want to admit failure. They don't want to admit neglect and possibly something more sinister if the lab leak is correct. Biological weapons, they have one of the countries which have invested a lot of money into this. Their military doctrines talk about it. So we cannot rule those out. And last thing I want to say, Rhythm, is the whole saga is now with the Fauci emails. What does that show? The Americans were naive. They thought that this is scientific cooperation. The same language, they fell for the Chinese. They thought this is one area where China and the US can bilaterally cooperate and do something good for humanity. But it backfired. What Fauci is saying is not that he was directly funding gain of function research in Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Yes, Dr. Cholia.
We gave that money. And we don't know whether the Chinese used it for the legitimate purposes or for something sordid and terrible. So I think the Chinese misused and milked the Americans. They have done not only with the US government, many private universities, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, you name it, some of the biggest names in US academia where there are high-tech labs have cooperated with China in good faith. And now the Chinese have repaid them back by backstabbing them, and now you see the reality. The Americans are waking
Correct,
up.
Dr. Cholia.
They had been so entangled with China in all forms of investments and scientific cooperation, and now they realize that behind their backs, the Chinese were hoodwinking them, and now the Americans themselves have paid a heavy price. The world is paying a heavy price for trusting China. So we cannot trust China. We cannot trust the Communist Party and its obscurantist mindset.
And therefore, Dr. Cholia,
we cannot trust them. That is the real lesson of this whole saga.
Yes.
And I hope the Americans have at least learned it late, but better late than never.
Yes, and I hope Professor Madhav Nalapat, Major General G.D. Bakshi, Vivek Srivastava, Ashutosh Mishra, I'm just going to come across to you. Before that, let us tell our viewers we have a fantastic panel as this is a global discussion. We're getting your views from Beijing, from United States, from United Kingdom, from the capital to get a real sense of what really is happening and what is the world asking for when it comes to a pandemic that yours and my life has been affected by. I go across now to the United Kingdom live. Joining us, Anders Kors, publisher of Journal of Political Risk. Mr. Kaur, I ask you, is it not true that since 2016 the Central Military Commission funded projects on military brain science, advanced biometric system, biological materials enhancement, and China followed a national strategy of military civil fusion? Is it not true in 2007 we all saw China created a 20-year plan to study natural human-made epidemics to create protective equipment for biodefense as part of China's public biodefense efforts? If so much is known about what China was planning to do, why is China still trying to say we won't have an investigation on our soil on the origins of the COVID-19 virus?
Well, I think you're absolutely right that we have to be concerned about what China is doing in terms of its biological weapons. There's no limit to what the Chinese Communist Party is willing to do to increase its control, to increase its power globally. And I think what really has been shown from these latest Fauci emails is that it's a big mistake to cooperate with China on science, on technology, on engineering, mathematics, what have you. And that includes all the way from the high scientific level to the grad students, the undergrads, the professors who want to collaborate and work with China. We just have to put an end to that. That is part of the problem here. It's when we allow China into our universities, when we allow China into our labs, when we allow China to have design labs in the United States, in India, in Europe, then we're giving away the keys to the kingdom. And it's a huge mistake. We've been doing this for decades, and we really have to take a clue from the hundreds of thousands of people who've died from COVID, and we've got to put an end to it. There should be no more STEM cooperation with China at all, period.
Yes. Yes, that's the way we look at it. Vivek Srivastava, I come to you. You've been raising your hand. The Chinese mouthpiece, Global Times, trying to create insecurity in the Indian neighborhood with a narrative that claims economy of India neighbor in South and Southeast Asia may need 2 decades to return to pre-pandemic level. At such a time, Vivek Srivastava, why do you feel India should be mum about it and not ask and support a growing clamor for an investigation into what I call the Wuhan crisis, the Wuhan virus?
Right. You see, the debate started quite well, and I agree with when Amish on your channel just said that there could be an investigation, but the investigation should not be punitive. You cannot say that we are all going to gang up and punish you. Let me investigate. It is the second biggest superpower in the world, at par with the United States, and you cannot dictate terms because it is going to yield you nothing. So Amish was very correct when he said try an investigation, but not punitive in nature. Secondly, as far as the Americans are concerned, a lot of money is, and see, let's not make this debate and anti-China rhetoric. I mean, let it not be just China hate. You're talking about a virus, okay? And now, I don't think even now you have substantial proofs to just accuse one particular country of trying to spoil up everything. And now I want to the BJP spokesperson said she does not believe in WHO, which means you do not believe in United Nations. Who is going to do the investigation? Who is going to allow the investigation? May I ask the panelists over here? Who is going to go? If you don't believe in the United Nations, and if the WHO has given a particular reading, you say it is biased, which means the World Bank and international monetary funds, which have been in the hands of the Americans all along, they are also biased. And where are we living? We are living in a bipolar world. So COVID is a dangerous thing. It is affecting us. That is one reality. But then the other reality is that the Americans will never go against China in any case. And neither the Chinese against the Americans. It's going to be a balanced thing, just like it happened in the time of the Cold War between the Russians and the Americans. And we need to be neutral. We need to be balanced. We need to have an identity of our own. If you try to step your line, have a bad foreign policy, do not have an identity of your own, and start having a policy which is totally pro-American. And why should I believe in a particular man called Donald Trump? Who is Donald Trump today? And what is the example he set up in the United States of America in Capitol Hill? Can we call him a Democrat? Is he going to be the role model of the Indians? So, I mean, yes, you go for an investigation if you want to. You need to
Mr. Gaur wants to respond to you before, and Major General G.D. Bakshi.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's just outrageous what you're saying, because, it's very clear that the Chinese have lied. The Chinese Communist Party has lied through their teeth about this whole COVID situation.
Please don't call us.
It's absolutely wrong what you said. So it does need to be punitive. I'm not saying that the investigation needs to be punitive, but we need to start thinking about suing China for trillions of dollars.
Who's going to punish, sir? Do you believe in the United Nations or not? Do you believe in the United Nations? That is my question.
1 minute, Vivek Srivastava. I want to also go across to Major General G.D. Bakshi. Mr. Kaur is making a point. He called what you said outrageous. Major General G.D. Bakshi, as I come to you, you've spoken several times, and this is a fact, Major General G.D. Bakshi, that we need to also explain to Vivek Srivastava. No one is so-called ganging up against China, but we also need to understand if who obligingly implied and the natural evolution theory naming the virus and the composition of WHO commission to probe the virus was heavily controlled by Chinese authorities, then we need an independent investigation, Major General G.D. Bakshi.
Exactly, Rhythm. Now, can I be permitted to speak without interruption from Vivek? I would like to point out that in 1999, I was serving in the Directorate General of Military Operations. I was dealing with nuclear, biological, chemical warfare, right? It was then that in 1999-2000, we had the Chinese book on unrestricted warfare by two of their senior colonels, which first spoke of using a multitude of means, military, non-military. They spoke of biological warfare in specific. This was followed up by another book in 2010, and then in 2017, the official military doctrine of the Chinese PLA, the Science of Military Strategy, had a new chapter which was devoted to biological warfare and weaponizing the viruses. For a country that has signed the Biological Warfare Convention banning biological weapons, it is very strange to have an official doctrine which talks of the use of biological warfare weapons. Number one. The smoking gun, however, came with the Xu Dezong study of the Chinese Air Force scientist who led a team of 18 scientists in 2015. They wrote 18 papers and made 24 presentations to the Central Military Commission and the top Chinese leadership. And you know some of the points that they made? The first point was that SARS is a genetically engineered virus which has been unleashed against China.
Not only China.
Will this gentleman be asked to keep quiet? None of us interfered with
only China.
I mean, we had a very
simple question.
Rhythm,
can you give me some debate? I have a question.
Being allowed to speak
I have a question which you cannot answer.
You can
were the Americans not doing any research on virology?
Finish what
were the Americans not doing any research on virology? Give me a yes or no.
This man to heckle. Every other gentleman of this debate
has only the Chinese. Why don't you talk of America?
Major General.
Why don't you talk of the United States?
Rhythm. Is he running the show?
Okay,
please.
Major General G.D. Bakshi, make your point. 1 minute. Vivek Srivastava, I've given you time to speak. Let Major General G.D. Bakshi make his point. I'll be coming back to you. I'll be going to Ashutosh. All of you will be getting a chance. But Major General G.D. Bakshi, you've spoken about something when you understood things from your own experience. Do continue.
On biological weapons, is there no research in America?
Thank you.
Is there no research in virology in America?
Look, I'm going
and in European countries? Is China the only culprit? This is my question.
Vivek, 1 minute. Let Major General G.D. Bakshi make his point.
Who?
Sure.
Please ask him to please lower his feeder. This man is just disrupting the debate.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, as I was saying, there is a trail in which the Chinese military doctrine is clearly talking about the employment of biological warfare weapons. There is in their military writings a clear perception that biological warfare has been used against China. That justifies in their mind a retaliatory use. That's extremely important. In 2015, their Wuhan Institute of Virology was led by two generals. It is still being led by two general officers, Major General Shi Zhengli and Major General Cao Mian, right? And Major General Shi Zhengli wrote 4 papers which were published online on weaponizing the virus, on using the SARS hook molecule protein and splicing it onto the backbone of the bat coronavirus in a standard gain of function operation. She published those 4 papers. She was in touch with Ralph Barrick of the University of North Carolina, right?
Yes.
Who helped her with the basic gain of function virus. I'm talking of facts which are cited in Nicholas Wade's paper in the very prestigious Atomic Bulletin of Scientists. All right? Ralph Barrick helped her with the gain of function research, a terrible mistake, right? And thereafter, he also introduced her to the serial passage of cultures, which tends to hide identity of a genetically engineered virus. Now, one British scientist and a Norwegian scientist have analyzed this sequence in detail. They have said that the SARS hook protein molecule, which was spliced onto the bat coronavirus in the Wuhan lab, had 4 negatively charged, amino acids. These latch onto positively
yes,
charged
Major General G.D.
amino
Bakshi, that's
acids,
right.
which latch onto the negative cells, negative cells in the human body. I'm talking facts, okay? Now, any physics student knows that if you have positive charges, they repel. It is difficult to find even 2 in a row amino acids negatively charged in nature. Here there are
I want to therefore, Major General G.D. Bakshi.
It's all
that this is a genetically manufactured virus. I'm not saying this. A Norwegian scientist
General,
and
do you believe in the
a British scientist have written a paper.
Vivek Srivastava, please do not heckle. I have heard his point. Major General G.D. Bakshi.
He's just.
I want to. And this is a valid point on the bat lady, as she was called, that Major General G.D. Bakshi is making. I want to take this point across to Aina Tangent, who's also joining us from Beijing. When the points that have been said, Aina Tangent, by Major General G.D. Bakshi needs proper answers when it comes to what the bat lady was actually probing into, and also whistleblower Dr. Li Wenliang. He was forced by the Chinese police to sign a letter to say that he was having untrue speech for warning colleagues about the COVID that actually killed him. How can China defend the suppression of an early warning which could have contained the spread of it from outside the borders of China?
Well, you've asked 2 questions. The first question is what the scientists who were studying bats, that was as part of an international consortium. Ever since they know that coronaviruses are extremely dangerous, there is a desire to understand how the spikes are created and how they interact with it. You have to do this type of research if, in fact, you want to have an ability to fight it later on. The point about weaponizing, I have no idea that the Chinese government is trying to weaponize this stuff. There's been no proof of that. You can certainly have a lot of people say that they believe so, but until you produce some sort of proof. In terms of having an investigation, I think China's concern is that, as you can see with this program, there are quite a few people who want to hang China before the trial as opposed to afterwards. So at this juncture, they're not interested in giving a lot of oxygen to people who have already made up their minds, as with many of the panelists here. In terms of what you said about the doctor who raised concerns, the concern there was that he was spreading panic. He didn't know about the coronavirus. He simply observed people were sick, and he started a rumor. They subsequently took away the punishment that they had put on him. He did, in fact, die, but it would not have made a material difference. Remember, the United States and the rest of the world, in essence, sat on their hands, believing that somehow the Chinese were inferior and would not be able to handle the coronavirus, which, in fact, they were able to. Meanwhile, the rest of the world was not so fortunate or prepared.
Okay, I also want to go across to Professor Nalapat. Professor Nalapat is a strategic analyst who understands the situation much better than the normal viewer. I ask you, is it not a lot of people trying to ask for just simply answers? This is no longer about China and China taking this as anti-China rhetoric, but really trying to understand where the origin of the COVID-19 virus really began. Why is Wuhan Institute of Virology not having a proper answering and an investigation done by an independent organization?
Rhythm, it's about millions of deaths, tens of millions of patients, possibly, most likely hundreds of millions, and more than 2 billion people affected economically and otherwise by this particular pandemic. Let me remind you that SARS-1, it rose its head in 2003. There was an initial attempt at suppression of information from the Chinese side, but then immediately the WHO, virologists across the world raised their voices and they pointed out what was happening in China and what was causing SARS-1. And General Secretary Hu Jintao then allowed the data to come out that frankly ensured that by 2004, this virus started fading in memory. Why is it that SARS-2 has become so deadly? It's become deadly. Now, look, if you track Baidu, for example, I mean, I know that anyone in Beijing will be tracking and using Baidu very oftenly. You'll see that from September, there was a huge rise in searches related to severe pneumonia, pneumonia type of diseases, even SARS type of diseases, a very, very marked rise in September, October, November, up to December. And it was really very high in December. And the fact is that this is very unusual because till September, there was hardly any query about pneumonia. It's not that there were no patients of pneumonia in China, no patients there, but there were hardly any queries. The queries started in September when something was going on. It started rising in October, November, and now we know that at least in November, if not in October, this virus had its origins. And may I say, it's no secret, Frank.
Someone argues that it's an animal-created virus because it came from a bat. Yes, it came from a bat in Yunnan, which is 1,500 kilometers away from the Wuhan laboratory. And then a spike protein was inserted into it by Xi Zhenglin. And may I point out, I don't think it's remarkable that this is so secret that few people seem to know it even now, that practically all the important research done in China is also
superintended by the military and has a civil and a military component. The Americans were given the civil component, which in this particular laboratory was about 30%, and 70% the military component.
Yes,
would
shocking.
Definitely have been hidden from them because unlike the Americans, the Chinese knew very well the adversary they were up against. I want to say that this entire problem was caused because of the denial of data, the shutting down of data, the erasing of several of these websites, tens of thousands of these websites, tens of millions of posts. All this was erased so that by the end of January, there was almost nothing there. And this rhythm was frankly also caused, this carnage, by the fact of the collaboration of scientists led by Dr. Anthony Fauci, who from the beginning poo-pooed this lab leak theory.
Yes.
Virologists in the United States, across the world, different countries who had been doing the research along with Chinese scientists and who, by the way, have started doing research again in 2011. And several Chinese scientists have written papers in international journals. It can't be a lab leak. It's not even a lab virus. It's basically definitely from nature. And possibly they'll come up now with some intermediate vector, which they haven't been able to come up with so far. The fact is, we are not interested in punishing China. I happen to have gone to China many times. I have immense respect for the Communist Party of China. They're a very effective and efficient party. I have great love and affection, as I know my friend Einar has, for the people of China. But this is about trying to ensure that if there is a serious pandemic that can kill tens of millions of people, the facts are given out clearly. And nobody really blames China for SARS-1. Why are they creating this thing about SARS-2? Well, the reality is they need to blame themselves as well. So long as a man like Fauci is there, who frankly knew all about this kind of virus, this gain of function,
yes,
knew about the insertion of spike proteins in this bat virus, and there's some something RAT 13 is the bat virus.
Yes.
And a spike protein
Professor Nalapat.
inserted into it.
Professor
It
Nalapat.
became SARS. So this cover-up took place across the world. WHO was silent. The man who was the leader of the cover-up in America became the head of the WHO investigating committee.
Well, if I may say so, apart from
Ashutosh, I'm just coming to you.
Accomplices in this. I'm sorry to say this, but this is the truth. When if a third virus comes up, wherever it comes from, please, whichever country it is, and so far almost all of these have come from China, please be candid and save lives the way lives were saved by Hu Jintao releasing a lot of data.
Professor Nalapat. Professor Nalapat, you make an important point, and before I come across, I also want to ask Ashutosh Mishra. Ashutosh, investigations have happened earlier. There have been viral outbreaks earlier. Why the paranoia now? Why does China think this is China, anti-China rhetoric? Why not just go in for an investigation straight and simple?
So, because Rhythm, as Indians, we have been victims of Chinese treachery and insidious intentions more than one. The latest has been in Galwan. So they cannot be trusted, and usually the rule of law is innocent unless proven guilty. But in case of China, the way they try to hide things and they try to cover up, we have to treat it very carefully. And India has an important position in the executive board of WHO. So it's our international responsibility and duty to bring these culprits to book. And China has this capability. I mean, it has. You have pointed out that they spoke about weaponizing using biological weapon in World War III. So they are the culprits. I totally disagree with my co-panelist from Beijing that we should not be prejudiced against China. Its behavior, even otherwise, has been aggressive, and it always tries to bully other nations, and we have seen it in Pacific also. We are seeing it in Taiwan, Galwan, wherever you go. So these are people who will go to any extent to have their hegemony over the world, and they need to be punished. Whoever says that no action should be taken, if China is found guilty, there should be economic sanctions against them, and we should make an example out of them, because if they get away, then these bullies are going to make life hell for us. We have lost a lot of people in this COVID, and you don't know what happens in the future. Even otherwise, they are always involved in war here, there, or bullying their own ogres at home. So China has to be, I mean, enough of carrot. It's time for a stick to China. And let's not try to shift blame to what Dr. Fauci did or didn't do. That is another investigation. Let America handle that. But as an important chair, we have the position at WHO, India needs to take this to logical end and see that the culprits are punished.
Can I make a point, please?
Yes, I think you've spoken extremely eloquently there.
And let's
and this is a point
to the neighbor.
Eichner, I also want to come across. What? I don't know whether it's Vivek Srivastava who's speaking up there or not.
Vivek, and I'll speak.
But I want to first go across to Eichner.
Since 1962, I'll just take 10 seconds. Since 1962 till Narendra Modi came, China and India did not have problems. It is the new government. When you side up with Australia, when you tow an American life, and try bad relations with every neighbor,
you don't seem to be taking
you have a bad relation with China. You have a bad relation with Pakistan. Nepal does not listen to you. Sri Lanka is not listening to you.
Time to Vivek Srivastava.
And there were no problems since 1962 till date.
I think, I don't know what kind of a debate this is.
And sort
where there is this man who comes and starts ranting against the Modi government.
Sanju Verma, go ahead.
Vivek Srivastava, stop behaving like a Chinese stooge.
I think Vivek
stop behaving like a Chinese stooge.
Nobody can punish anyone.
Vivek Srivastava, stop behaving like a Chinese stooge.
No, I am not.
Rhythm, can I please make a point?
Because of your
you are a Chinese stooge. Shame on you.
No.
Go ahead. Sanju, make your point.
We don't have
no wonder your party got 0 seats in Bengal.
We don't have vaccines in our country.
You were kicked out of Tripura.
Everything is being black marketed.
After 25 years, the CPI was kicked out of Tripura in 2008.
No, China is not a
in
problem.
2021, you got
finished.
Barring
You did not
Kerala,
have
you
the
have no
resources.
relevance in
You
India.
did not have oxygen.
So stop
You
giving
did not
lectures
have
to the Modi
medicines.
government on foreign
That is the
policy.
problem.
You are a
Please
Chinese
concentrate on
acolyte,
your
a
own
Chinese
development.
stooge.
Please
No
concentrate on your
wonder
own
you have
development.
been kicked out of
Kindly do
Bengal.
not
Do
speak
you know what the vote
against the
share of
United
CPM
Nations.
was in Bengal?
Please do not
A
speak
measly
against the
4%.
WHO. These are
You
world
managed a
bodies
4%
that need to
vote
be
share in
respected.
Bengal, and you are busy lecturing the Modi government
You
on
please
what it
talk on
should do.
China, okay? Talk on
Stop
China.
hallucinating.
You have massacred
Stop
3.5
hallucinating.
lakh
You are
Indians.
politically irrelevant
You have
today.
massacred
You are not even a
3.5
vernacular
lakh
party.
Indians.
Forget
And the
about
Prime
being a national
Minister
party.
should resign.
The only
The
importance you
Prime
get
Minister
is on
should feel
Republic
ashamed
debates.
and he should resign.
The only
His foreign
presence you
policy
have is
has
on
cost
Republic
us
debates.
3.5 lakh
Otherwise,
Indians.
nobody cares
More
two
than that have
hoots
died.
about you.
And so many got affected
Nobody
because there
cares
were
two
no
hoots
resources.
about
Okay,
the
Major General G.D. Bakshi wants to come in and also make a point. Major General G.D. Bakshi.
You're not rhythm. I don't understand.
Major General G.D. Bakshi
would
wants to make a
like
point.
to-
Important point.
Can I kindly have my say without this man's heckling?
Without being
Can I
heckled by
kindly
debate?
have my say without this man's heckling? Rhythm, I think you need
Okay,
to
Major
control
General
this
G.D.
debate.
Bakshi. Sanjay,
Put
just
his
let Major
finger
General
down.
G.D. Bakshi also
He's
let
just-
him make a point. Let him make his point. Major Bakshi.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Major General G.D. Bakshi.
I'd like to point out in all humility, 167 million people have been affected all over the globe, right? 3.5 million people are dead. In India, it is 300,000 people, Indian citizens who are dead. All right? And here is a man trying to tell us that China is a great power, that it is a bipolar world. I contest that it is a multipolar world. We have to safeguard the lives of our citizens. We have to safeguard the lives of our citizens. We have to deter China from further such attacks. If it is allowed to get away with murdering 3.5 million citizens globally, I'm afraid it's not a matter which can be brushed under the carpet. You know, my Chinese friend on this panel was very sanguinely telling us that China has been able to handle it better. Quite obviously, China started it. It was prepared for it, right? And it withheld deliberate suppression of information to see that this virus would be weaponized. Look, the first patient officially emerged on 8th of December, 2019. In February 2020, Foreign Minister of China, Chen Yi, was telling the neighboring states not to close their borders. It was permitting 25 flights a day to fly from Wuhan to New York.
Yes, Major
20
Bakshi,
flights
yes.
a day to go to Italy. Italy, it deliberately was allowing it to spread. It was weaponizing
Shocking.
the virus which it had, so-called released by accident. It was more a staged accident.
Yes.
It was more
And
a
the squad
staged
also wants to
accident.
make a point to and adds to what Major General G.D. Bakshi is saying, and then I go across to Einar. I have only 2 minutes remaining on the debate. Major General G.D. Bakshi, Anders, your point also here, please.
Thanks. I mean, he's absolutely right that China is to blame for this, and our colleague from Beijing said something that's just not true, which is that we have to do gain of function in order to get ahead of these viruses. I think that's a very debatable point, and there's a lot of scientists who would disagree and say that gain of function research is just too dangerous given the potential of the pandemic, and now we see that that's true. My second point is that in order to hold China accountable, we have to unify as democracies. Americans, Europeans, Indians, everyone who is a democracy, and everyone who, even if you're not a democracy, if you're Vietnam or Saudi Arabia, who wants to maintain their sovereignty in the next 10, 20, 30 years, we have to unify to essentially defeat the Chinese Communist Party, which is bent on world domination. I mean, that's the reality. And so if we do not quickly unify our democracies and our other sovereign allies and friends, we are, over time, our elites are going to get compromised, which is exactly what's happening. And through the compromise of our elites, whether it's bribery or consulting contracts or what have you, they're just going to lead our democracies and our sovereign countries by the nose wherever they want to go. So we've got to get smart, and we've got to get smart very quickly. And it does mean also an alliance between the U.S. and India.
Yes, Mr. Kaur. Yes, there's an alliance. I am tangent. This is not about a rhetoric, but I do believe 14 countries have expressed concerns over the WHO-China joint report. The European delegation has said there's an urgent need for an extensive research. 100 countries call for an investigation into really what happened, a joint investigation, which is needed, an independent probe. Do you not think, after hearing all the views here, it's just an independent probe? That is much the need of the hour in the Wuhan origin of the COVID-19 virus.
Well, I'd agree that there needs to be a forensic analysis of where this came, where the virus came from, so that you can try to establish how to prevent it in the future. But as this show has shown, I mean, there's so many facts that are being represented that are simply not true. There's so many on your panel who have already convicted China. They don't want to hear anything else. So at this point, it's really hard to see how there would be a fair assessment. I think it would be better if you left this to the scientists rather than the politicians.
Yes.
Rhythm.
Okay, this is I've given a chance to everyone on this panel to be heard. I thank everyone for being here. But the one thing that needs to be said, we've all called several variants by the name and the origin of the country, but we never started off by calling the COVID-19 virus the Wuhan virus. I would just like to say the investigation on the viral outbreaks have happened before. There should be no paranoia. There needs to be an independent investigation, and it's time. The global clamor, even in the scientific community, has stated there's an investigation that is needed. It should be done as quickly as possible, because the world needs to understand the originating virus that has affected each one of us. Thank you for being with us on this debate. Viewers, at 10 o'clock we show you every state in India and how the COVID fight in India is taking on. That's up next. Stay on with us. We slip into a quick break. Back after that.